Hi.
Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome to Awakenings Within. How are you doing tonight, Bob?
Well, I'm doing good. It's been 70 degrees and sunny outside. How much better does that get?
I know. It's awesome, isn't it?
Yeah, I was expecting you to come with sunburn.
No. It's office work today. So
Okay.
Hi, welcome to anyone who's joined us. If you've joined us, say hello and good evening from Kansas City, Thursday evening. So I am so excited. We finally get the guests that I've been wanting to have on for, I don't know, months and months, right? So
Yes,
Bob has some things in common.
Teasing me with them.
I know, and you have some things in common, and I can't wait for us to share and talk about it. I have Dr. Holmes and Dr. Holmes with us, and I'm so excited. And Dr. Grace Holmes and Dr. Fred Holmes, and I really am excited to have them on.
We're just missing Sherlock.
Huh?
We're just missing Sherlock.
Yes, we're missing Sherlock. Well, he could tell you about Sherlock. So I'm going to add them right now. And there we are. Hello. Hi, Grace and Fred. Thank you. And Dr. Holmes and Dr. Holmes.
Hello, Sandy. We're delighted to be here. Honored, in fact.
Great. Wonderful. So I want to share, I connected with them, I don't know, back in August, and I've gotten to know them well, and their story to me is just so amazing. And they've been on so many adventures, and they said, what do you want us to talk about? And I'm like, I don't even know where to start, because there's so many things, and there's so many things that they could share. And they've written books, and maybe if you guys could share with us just the beginning, like when you met and how you met and all those things.
Go ahead, my dear. Tell them how we met.
You're louder.
I'm louder, she says. We met in medical school in the University of Washington in Seattle in 1953. We were members of the class of 1957. There were 5 women in the class and 70 men. And I looked over, and one day in a lecture, I saw a very pretty girl, and I realized she was smart. She was smarter than me. Of course, that doesn't take much. And also that she had a thin cadaver next to mine. Now, you might find that gross, but you have to take apart a human being in the first year of medical school. And if it's fat, it's hard to do. If it's thin like Grace's cadaver, you don't have to take apart much. It's all there. Sweetie, wasn't that right?
Yes.
Straight to the point.
All right. So Grace, if you would tell me, I know what year was that again, Fred?
53. We started medical school together.
And Grace, you are kind of a pioneer in female physicians. What was that? What was that like for you? I mean,
Well, there was a mixture of men and women, and of the Women, there were 50 of them.
Five,
But,
sweetie.
I mean, of the men, there were 50 of them. There were 5 women.
Wow.
And you had to look hard to see who was a woman and who was not. But this was a new thing that the University of Kansas, Washington in Seattle was trying out to invite and ask young women to enter medical school.
Wow. When did you know that you wanted to be a doctor?
Oh, I think I always knew it.
Yeah?
I loved, and still do, love little children, and I wanted to go out and just be the best doctor for little children of the world.
Oh, that is so great.
So, how do you guys stay in touch much with Pacific Lutheran? Because I read that on your bios, and that got my attention, and I'll explain why. Did you stay in touch with the school?
Pacific Lutheran.
Did you stay in touch with Pacific Lutheran School?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Well, yeah, we did, because Grace's family was established there, and we were given honors by I went to the Methodist school in town, College of Puget Sound, and we were invited there to hang out with the alumni occasionally, and we didn't bring any disgrace to either school. I can
Well, the reason I'm asking is long after you guys were gone, one of my friends' dads became the football coach there. A guy by the name of Frosty Westering.
Oh,
So when I read your bio and I saw Pacific Lutheran, it just jumped off the page at me, because I'm very, very familiar with that football program and the impact that Frosty had on a lot of young men.
Yeah, including one of our nephews, who was a kicker and was a little All-American. Yeah, even though I went to the Methodist school, I'm a Lutheran, and I was very proud of that school and of Frosty.
Well, I mean, put this in perspective. His record was 305 wins and 96 losses. I mean, that's an extraordinary record. I mean, he was dominant as a coach. But more than that, he was a character guy. He was very much about instilling character into young men. And so he passed away, I think, back in 2013. But his daughter's a good friend of mine.
Oh, how very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
His daughter, Stacy. She actually, funny enough, married Gary Spaney, who played for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool.
Small
there
world,
you go.
right? Small world.
You got a Pacific Lutheran grad here. A next generation lives in Kansas City, married to one of the Chiefs players. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think your brother's the coach there now. I think he took over. But anyways, sorry, I just had to throw that in there because I'm always fascinated by connections, and here's this connection.
There's a lot of connections.
So
that's right. That's right. And so you guys have another connection that we'll talk about in a little bit. But they also, so that was in 53. So when did you guys graduate medical school?
1957.
57.
Okay.
We were married halfway through, and believe it or not, there was some concern that the dean might throw Grace out of medical school, because it was presumed any woman that went to medical school was not there to become a doctor. She was there to find a doctor and get married. We convinced him that we intended to get married, and we'd stay in school and we'd graduate, and we did. We didn't disappoint the dean. And it was so unusual to graduate from medical school in Seattle in 1957. A couple, we had a picture and a story on the front page of the local newspaper. Now just think of that in respect to now.
Well, that's the year I was born. So,
well, I'm glad
and
you were
I'm
born.
old. So what that makes you is a legend.
Just Right. So after you graduated medical school, then where did you guys go? Where did you do your internships and that kind of thing?
You want to talk?
Oh, go ahead.
Huh?
Go ahead.
We sought a good clinical internship. University of Washington in those days was a research school, and everybody, all the faculty had grants, NIH grants, and we partook of some of that research, but we didn't really get a lot of really good clinical training. But the University of Kansas was famous for having excellent clinical training, and we were not disappointed. We came here and spent a hard year here in 57 and 58. And we've considered really the University of Kansas our home, and it has been indeed, because every time we left, we came back, and we finally retired on the faculty in the year 2000.
Oh, wow.
Well, I think just to give people that might be listening some perspective, and I don't think I'm exaggerating on this, but I would have to say that probably 90% of our knowledge about medicine has happened in your lifetime. In other words, your journey as doctors is rather extraordinary. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Something the Lord Has Made, but it's about the guy who was working with blue babies, and putting stints. But I mean, that's in the late 40s. I mean, you become doctors only a decade later. I mean, medicine was still in the perspective of today, still fairly primitive.
Right. Yeah.
So I just honor you for your legacy, because I mean, the journey that you've been on and where medicine has gone in your lifetime is just extraordinary.
Right. So when was your next stop when you guys decided to be adventurous? What year was that?
Well, let's see. We returned home after 4 years, and then we decided that we didn't know everything about medicine. We better go back and study some more about medicine, which we did, and we stayed at the University of Kansas for another 6.
Well, we were off and on, but we at the finishing of our internship, by that time we'd been contacted by the Lutheran Church in New York that wanted to send medical missionaries to Malaya in Southeast Asia, where there was a civil war going on, rather like Vietnam later. The difference was the British were running things and not the Americans, and the war was won. And we were sent off to England to study tropical medicine, and then to Kuala Lumpur for a language study. We had to learn to speak Chinese to deal with the refugees, and then off and create a system of clinics up in the northern part of Malaya where the guerrillas were. And we had a good time. We worked hard, saw 800 to 1,000 patients a week. And by the time we were finished with that, we came home and got some more training. That's putting it in a nutshell.
And how long was that? How long were you in Malaya?
We were there for 4 years.
4 years.
And it was quite an adventure. When we came home, we were just 30 years old. We'd seen thousands of patients. And we had a good clinic. We were very proud of it. We had an x-ray machine. We had lab facilities, a modest amount. And we took care of, as I say, thousands and thousands of patients.
Wow.
We also had 2 little girls to take home when we went home on furlough.
Yes. So you
We were going to have 8 children, but we got a late start. So then we had 2. We had 2 little Chinese babies that had no homes, and we took them in, and they made parents out of us. I don't know if we were good parents or not. One of them now is 61 years old. Hard to believe, isn't it?
Yeah. So so you adopted. How many children though did you adopt?
Well, we finally adopted 5 children, and actually number 4 child we didn't adopt. We finally figured out how you make babies, so we made a baby that fit right in there as number 5.
That's great. That's great. So after you did Malaya, you came back here, and then didn't you go somewhere else after that?
You want to talk about Africa?
Sure. After we decided that it was important for us to seek another place to work overseas. We enjoyed, it was hard work, but we enjoyed it very much and decided that we wanted to go again. Didn't have to be Malaysia, though we enjoyed Malaysia very much. And we this time we went to Africa. Isn't that right?
Yes,
Yeah,
East
yeah.
Africa, Tanzania.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Tanzania.
yeah.
So, how long were you guys there?
We were there for two years, and there we had, you could give the numbers.
Well,
There we had lots of patients.
in Tanzania, it had been part of the German Empire, which ended in 1918 with the end of the First World War, and the British took over. But the Germans kept an interest in there, and the German Lutheran Church decided to build a hospital at the foot of Mount Kilimanjaro, the Kilimanjaro Christian Medical Center. In Tanzania, to this day, the dominant religion is Christianity, and it's basically Lutheran or Catholic, depending on which German missionaries got there in the late 19th and early 20th century. So it was a beautiful hospital. We got there to get it open. It had 400 to 500 beds. It was quite different than a clinic system. We had excellent radiology. We had good lab. We had superb nursing. It was a wonderful, probably at its time, the best hospital in East Africa. But with the 5 kids by that time, and one of our daughters had some medical problems, we came home, but we left a legacy. And the hospital survives. It is now a medical school, graduating medical students. It has a medical faculty that are African. So what we went out to do got done, and it got done well, and we remain proud of that effort.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. Tell them about the time that you were going to the clinics. What he was telling me about the planes that they used to go to the outlying clinics.
Oh, you could,
We had an Air Force. We had 2 single engine 5-seat planes. We had one pilot, and one of the ophthalmologists himself was a pilot. And we used to fly out to mission hospitals within about 4 hours reach of our main hospital. And I'd go with the surgeon usually, and do elective stuff, palates and hair lips and this sort of thing. And I would make rounds on pediatrics, I'm an internist, and medicine, and see diagnoses that need to be corrected. And I did it in a genteel way. And we were always welcome. We'd stay overnight usually and then go home the next day. And it was a good medical mission in that sense. And believe me, if you're in a small mission hospital stuck out in the boonies, you're very happy to see a colleague fly in, because everybody had a landing strip in those days, and help you out with some of your difficult patients.
Oh, that's good. So tell me about the plane, though. The one time that you said the plane, you were a little fearful. Actually, it was you, Grace, that was telling me about the plane.
we both flew on the plane. And why don't you tell about the usual runs, but then I'll tell about.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead, sweetie. I'm talking too much.
Okay. I was given permission to go with the pilot out to the Serengeti and to see some of the African patients there. And I asked him what was the problem we were going to see and so forth. And he said, well, unfortunately, we're going to pick up a young woman who is pregnant and is past her pregnancy date and it is not progressing in her giving birth. So he said, we will see how she's doing, and we may have to take her, redo our steps and take her back to the hospital in Arusha. So we went to see her, and she was a lot of pain. And this was a Maasai couple. And we think of the Maasai with tall men and tall women, and that they're sort of fierce. But in a way, when you get to know them, they're not that fierce. They're very nice, friendly people. But we each had a time when we could go out with
The pilot.
Well, it was
pilot,
the ophthalmologist playing.
with the
yeah,
pilot.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so we looked at the lady who was pregnant, soon to be a mother, and she was in severe pain. And her husband, he looked very scared, very scared. He wasn't a tough Maasai man at that moment, but he was very solicitous of his wife. And it was decided that she needed to go back. We needed to retrace our steps and go to a government hospital in Arusha, and she needed to be hospitalized there. So I stayed with the pilot, and we had 2 passengers who returned to Arusha, and then we picked them up on the way out again to the far west. The father was it was interesting to watch the father. There are lots of fathers I know in the United States who are scared of childbirth and so forth. This one was frantically scared. He thought she might die, and indeed she did, which was after we left again, because she had gone into
Obstructive labor.
yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, she was obstructed, and the fetus was dead, and there was no saving her, though that was the effort. Yeah. When you're flying out in Africa, I don't know if it's still true. It may be, but everybody has a landing strip, and getting down on the ground. Sometimes, if the pilot's good, you'll say, well, "Where are we going to land down there? Because I can't see a landing strip." "Oh, it's right over there, between those trees and those rocks." I said, "You're going to put this plane down in some grass between rocks and trees?" He said, "Well, that's where the landing strip is." We'd make several passes. There'd be cattle down there.
Yeah.
And then finally we'd be on the ground. And I think, boy, I'm not going to do this again. But I kept doing it because it was worth doing. And I remember we took a man back to our hospital. He, of course, had never been in a plane. He had a brain tumor. I made that diagnosis. And we could possibly get him to Nairobi for an operation. And when he got in the plane and we were up about maybe 3,000 feet, he looked out. In Swahili, the word for bird and airplane is ndege. And he didn't know if he was on the back of a bird or if he was in an airplane, which he'd never seen before. I had to hang on to him so he didn't jump out. And we got him back and we sent him to Nairobi. And as far as I know, he was saved. We saved a lot of people that way. And it was daunting to trying to run an emergency room in an airplane 2,000 feet up. Hoping the pilot really did know where the rocks ended and the trees began.
Just one thing I'd like to add. When the young man, soon to be a father, but sadly the baby died, when he said goodbye to his wife, he had tears in his eyes. And he was no different from many a young husband other places in the world.
Yeah.
This taught me that people are the same wherever you go.
Absolutely.
Wherever you Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that was it was a, from what you were telling with the plane, that it was a harrowing experience too. Isn't the plane doing something that you were a little fearful about as well at the same time? So you had to worry about that and the plane, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our pilot was an old German, and I think he didn't fly in the First World War, but he might well have. And he was good. He knew what he was doing. But on the other hand, I didn't always know what he was doing. We went to a Belgian hospital out near the coast. I love that hospital. They had, it was run by Belgian sisters, a Catholic hospital. And most of the hospital we went to were probably Protestant. They didn't feed you very well. The nuns fed us really good meals with wine. We got a good wine with our meals. The Presbyterians and the Methodists were not long on wine with their meals. But to take off at that field, we would run down the side of a mountain as fast as he could get the propeller to go. And just before we went down in the chasm at the bottom, he'd take off. That had your stomach right in the back of your throat for sure.
So Bob also was a missionary over in Africa. So do you relate in any way with the plane rides, Bob? Or
well, again, it's a different generation. So their generation, what he's talking about is actually quite common. In fact, a lot of the missionaries were pilots. I mean, you actually piloted your own plane. I was, my involvement, I actually was in Nairobi visiting. I've been in Nigeria, South Africa, and primarily Zimbabwe is where I've been focused, but I've met their generation of people over there. And one thing they all have in common, they all have pilot's license. They all used to fly and they all have stories just like this. It's just some of the crazy, harrowing moments, where you're navigating some of that, erratic African weather, and, putting planes down in places that you just can't imagine. So, interesting corollary, of course, is their generation of missionaries would be in that same vein as, the missionaries that were killed in Ecuador, and one of the sons who lost his dad, Steve Saint, went on to form ITAC, which is a whole missions-focused ministry on technology and planes and helping missionaries get into remote places and stuff like that. So now, with the drone technology, where you don't need to have a manned flight, that's taking some interesting twists and turns. So no, you guys have some amazing stories, and
they have so many.
That whole period of missions in Africa was, sort of the golden age, it's a little different these days, but the hospitals, what ended up happening with me, just to give you some backstory, I know nothing about medicine, but I had a Zimbabwean friend whose mother was dying. And he came back from Zimbabwe or I think it was 2007, and basically said, "This is unbelievable, but my mom's in the hospital and I can't even get her a simple catheter." Like, he goes, "I spent a week running around all of Harare trying to find a simple catheter because medical supplies were just so hard to get in there." Right. So I had read where medical supplies here that are outdated actually can still be used, even though whatever it is, the FDA or whatever medical organization says it's past its use by date, it actually still works. So I started going around to hospitals in Kansas City and Joplin, Springfield, the Midwest area, Chicago, and basically said, "Hey, can you donate, and don't throw these things out. Can we have them?" And so I had a little warehouse down in a cave, the underground caves down on 31st Street, the old original caves. And we had a warehouse down there, and we just bring in all these medical supplies and load 40-foot containers and ship them over to Zimbabwe of all this stuff. And it was interesting because it was more valuable than money. I mean, to be able to have, medical, it's so simple. Like, I ended up shipping over cases of antibiotics that that had expired, but still had what, a 98% potency, that can't be used here. But for somebody in Africa who's never had an antibiotic, that's powerful. Wow. So, and you're seeing people there die of simple infections. So,
what was your biggest struggle when you were there? What was the illnesses that were the?
Well, we were the world's capital for amoebic abscess in the liver, and the water was polluted coming down Kilimanjaro, and the best beer was made with the most polluted water. But in any event, we discovered that we didn't have to. I used to stick needles in those things and suck out the pus, but the common antibiotic, now this is 50 years ago, which is Flagyl, which is used in women here for trichomoniasis of the vagina. And we use that to get in the liver. And we could give 10 tablets to somebody with a big swollen liver from an abscess and send him home and he'd get better. Wow. We did that kind of simple research and we published, I think, 3 articles on that. Worked very well.
Wow.
I would say the quality of doctors and nurses we had was exceptional for Africa. We had a CT surgeon from Norway. We had a orthopedic surgeon from Denmark. We had an ex-RAF guy who used to come over. He had a coffee plantation. He would do plastic surgery. 2 pathologists. In the medicine department alone, we had 6 people. We had an famous ophthalmologist, Joseph Taylor, who had taught himself eye surgery. Imagine that, 50 years ago.
Wow.
I was just thinking, the one shining light, really, in a way, I think of this often. I had the best nurse I've ever had in my entire career, way over 40 years. Magdalena Msafiri was an African woman of the local tribe, the Chaga people. She and many of our nurses have been trained in England with the history of Florence Nightingale. I would show up every morning in my ward, had 40 beds, 4 bedrooms, and then there were about half a dozen single rooms. We had there was no way to have an ICU or anything like that. Magdalena would be standing there waiting for me. It was her ward, not mine. I was a guest.
You were the guest. It was hers.
And it worked very well.
Oh.
Standing beside her was her assistant. They were called sister. Was her assistant sister. And then a young nurse with a ledger book on a cart. I never wrote anything down. Everything was dictated on the run. And everything with the patients was in Swahili, which I could do at that time. And all the chatter about patients with the nurses was in English. I could make rounds in an hour and a half, and some of those people were real sick. I had some private patients. I had an American doctor and radiologist who had a myocardial infarction on the Kilimanjaro coming down. And I picked him up on a Sunday afternoon, and he was the only myocardial infarction I had in 2 years. You just don't get that kind of stuff in Africa. And so we didn't have all the things to take care of, but we did. We got him better, and we sent him home with his wife. But Magdalena, I will always remember.
No. So
well, we need to take the time out here because we need to let our guests know that your grandchildren are checking in and watching you.
Hi. Yes.
They're all saying hi, so we want to make sure you know.
Teddy and Alex. Yeah. Yeah, they're saying hello. He's very proud. Teddy said that he'd like to take the chance to brag that those are his grandparents. And then Alex says hi, Grandma and Grandpa. So
hi to all of you.
They have they have so many stories that this was hard to just kind of do this in 1 hour because they're also authors. So they were the head in Kansas at KU. They were both heads of, what were you the head of at KU?
Well, I ended up there being having
well,
I was go ahead.
Grace is a developmental pediatrician, and she had a large research enterprise and invented a growth charts that were used all over the world.
Yes,
They
and
were
you have them.
Yes.
Right?
translated into Chinese.
Yes.
Yes.
Hold it up, sweetie.
Yes. And
Translated into Chinese and Farsi. I don't know, all sorts of stuff. She would never.
And I worked for a genetics doctor in the 2000s, and we were using these actual charts, and that's so neat. I get to meet the lady that created them. It's just amazing to me.
Well, I want to circle back on the Africa thing. Sorry, I'm still stuck back there, but I have a question which I'm curious about. How much of your in Africa did you ever integrate sort of the local natural cult? I mean, there's all kinds of African natural cultural cures as well. And I've always been curious because some doctors now they're sort of homeopathic. They'll use both, traditional medicine with natural medicine. So did that ever come up? Was that ever an issue where you guys were?
Well, we didn't. In a hospital practice, there wasn't any way to do this in the hospital. Okay, we had a nice home in town. We didn't live with the missionaries out at the hospital. We lived with the Africans downtown. Had a nice house. And our gardener, Stephen, he was a good guy. I like Stephen. But he said, Doctor, he says, I have herbs that I have found that will cure many diseases. I said, oh, really, Stephen? He said, I can tell you about these herbs. I said, well, someday we'll sit down and do that. Well, somehow we never got around to it.
Oh.
And the one thing I taught him when we left was how to drive the car and got him a license. So you get a job driving trucks. I don't have much thought about natural medicine. It doesn't show much. There are some things that come out of that. The occasional antimalarial drug comes out of that kind of stuff, but for the most part, and in the Chinese community, going back to Malaya, a lot of the patients had tried the Chinese doctors for various things, and the reason they came to the clinic was the Chinese medicine didn't work. So I understand your question. I do.
The acupuncture didn't help, huh?
No.
I think you have to respect local customs. Sure.
Right.
We had a deal with a couple of bone setters in Malaya. That was a specialty in that Chinese community, and I would let them I would get X-rays for them, particularly of the arm, so that they could get the splints set right. So preserving the angles in the of the small bones in the wrists, so they get a functional wrist. That worked out well.
Well, what you're talking about, so most Americans probably wouldn't even be aware of this, but if you go over to Africa, one of the things that you'll see every once in a while is you see somebody walking and their arm suddenly takes sort of a weird angle and then down, and it's like, what? And then when you probe a little deeper, you found out that they broke their arm, but nobody ever reset it correctly.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you see that, I've seen that in children. I mean, it's sad in a way. So it's great, So simple things like plaster casting, whatever that's, what I mean, to put your arm in a cast, to keep it. I mean, those things are just, for us, that's kind of a default setting. Like that's what we do here. That's kind of normal.
Right.
But there are places in Africa that they can't even get that stuff.
So there's a hello from Samantha and Eric also who are on here. So
Samantha and Eric, hi guys.
Yes, they're saying hello too. So all right. So you guys adopted 5 kids?
Yep.
Adopted 5 kids and then came back here. And then they also both are authors, like I was saying earlier. So Grace, tell me the name of your books.
Okay, let me see here.
Yes, she has a few.
Well, I wrote a book about our marriage and our family, and it was called.
I'm getting it for you.
He's getting them for you. So how many books, Fred? 2 or 3?
Between the two of us, I don't know, maybe 20. I'm not even
20
sure.
books. Yes, between the two.
Here we go.
Yeah.
That's her.
So
this is whither thou goest, I will go, and this was meant to be a message to my husband, where he went, I would go with them.
Oh,
And that was the message. And I just thought that everybody in the world needed to read it because I had the most wonderful husband.
That's sweet.
isn't that
Here.
great?
Here is the picture, if you can get it,
Yeah.
on the front. This us. That's the newspaper picture of us graduating
I'll
in
put it in.
Seattle. You can
Here,
see
I'll
it.
put it in my view a little bit better.
Yeah, there you go.
There.
Wow.
Yes. So whither thou goest, I will go.
No, isn't that taken from Ruth? Isn't that?
Yes.
Yeah, from Ruth. Oh, here you go.
I want to brag Grace up.
Yeah.
She was going to write. We had a big website on World War I medicine. World War I, 1918. It was the best in the world. We did it at the History of Medicine Department at KU Medical Center. Grace decided she would write a book about women doctors in the First World War. It wouldn't work because there weren't enough. So I said, do nurses. There were lots of nurses. There were 20,000 nurses in the First World War from America alone. So we worked with the History of Medicine library there where we had connections. And the History of Medicine librarian, the research librarian, is a good search agent. And she looked around the country, state historical societies, hospitals, libraries, whatnot, to see what you could find in the way of books, letters, whatever. And there was almost nothing. Almost nothing.
Wow.
And the reason was simple. It took us a while to figure it out. The nurses in the American Army and the American Red Cross in 1918 were officers. The first time women had been officers in the Army. Officers were forbidden to keep diaries, and all of their letters home were censored.
Oh, wow.
I had one woman left on the list, and there were several pages. I'm the gopher for Grace when she needs me, and she is my gopher when I need her. A woman in North Dakota. I called up the North Dakota State Historical Society. I told the woman what I wanted, the clerk. She said, yes, we have 2 pages on this woman. She was a nurse in the First World War. I said, that's what I knew. I said, can I have a copy of each of the pages? She said, yes. And just as I was about to hang up, she said, do you want the other 225 nurses from North Dakota? I said, yeah. She said, it'll cost you $35. I said, send it right now. Can you imagine that? Nobody from New York, California, Texas, or anywhere else. All of a sudden, the golden apple fell in our laps. Grace spent a year and went through all of the stories, first-person stories of these women, and wrote this book. It is the best book anybody ever wrote about nurses in the First World War.
Yes.
Others tried, but nobody found the golden apple that Grace found. There you are.
Yeah.
Wow.
You can still get it.
Dakota nurses.
Grace
over there.
gave the royalties to the North
She gave the royalties away.
North Dakota Auxiliary of the American Legion. And Grace gave the American Legion in North Dakota the copyright. They sell these books still. They're worth $35 a pop through the American Legion Auxiliary. And they created a scholarship program for young women, and could be men, in North Dakota who want to go to nursing school. And it's named the Grace E. F. Holmes, MD, Nursing Scholarship.
Yeah.
And they've sent a lot of girls through school on that
That's
book.
wonderful. What a legacy.
I know. And then he wrote a book, which him and I talk about all the time because I like the historical Scottish stories and that kind of thing. So what was your book?
Well, it's up there somewhere.
Holmes? Yes.
There's a lot of books up there, but
yes, you do have a lot of books up there that they've written. So those are the nonfiction, and then they have a whole nother fiction part, and I will put all the links to all their books in the comments. Does anybody have any questions? But this book, when I first started in getting to know them, him and I talked about this book for quite a bit because I'm totally the Sickly Stewarts.
Oh, yeah.
I never finished college. I
amazing-
left college after 3 years to get in medical school early.
That's awesome.
So I was always ashamed that I didn't have a proper education. So I took off a sabbatical in early 1990s, late 1980s, and went over to KU at Lawrence and worked for a master's degree. I had superb professors. And one of my professors was the world's authority on the Stuart monarchs who ruled Britain from 1600 to the early part of the 18th century. James I, he of the King James Bible, all the way down through Anne. I spent 10 years getting all of their medical records, believe me, all over the place, and got them all, and I got all of their diagnoses right. Now, I don't mean to demean, that's a terrible statement, PhD historians, but they don't really care about their subjects. If they die, they die. What difference does it make?
Right.
I care a lot. I want to get the diagnosis right. Even if they are dead, I want to write. So I got all the diagnoses right and published the book. And it was published in the UK, and it didn't get very good reviews, sort of good. And I did make some money. I sold it originally to Macmillan for $5,000. They thought they were going to make a lot of money. Well, they didn't. And it went to a smaller publishing house. They let me keep the $5,000. And then they gave me a few $1,000 and it got printed.
No, I've got a copy of both of those last two books, by the way.
But I don't know if many people understand why you see these family lines, with these genetic problems that pass on through, because they don't really understand how the aristocracy intermarried. I mean, another very common problem you had was hemophilia. But when you see the connection between the Germans and the Russians and the families and how and that happened later. That was in the 18 and 1900s. So
you're right.
Yeah. Who was it that you found that they thought had been poisoned but wasn't?
A lot of them had autopsies because of that. Someone says the king was poisoned. So they got a surgeon, opened up the abdomen and looked in the abdomen for poison. Well, none of them were poisoned as far as I could determine, but they got good autopsies. And I found autopsies on a lot of them. And for example, Charles II, who was the king of whom Parliament said, Charles, we're sick and tired of supporting your bastard children. We want you to stop hanging out and fooling around. When he died, it was thought that he died of chronic mercury poisoning, because he was a chemist and trying to find gold. And I looked at the autopsy results when I got them. He had acute mercury poisoning is what he had. He had all the findings of acute.
Oh, wow.
Queen Anne, the last, she had 17 pregnancies and 3 live births. One died at a 1 year, another at 2 years, and the third, how old did he get? He got to about 10 or 11, didn't he? Yeah. And then he died of pneumonia. And she had clearly had lupus. And she had the phospholipid antibody syndrome, which meant for lots of miscarriages. But the real books that Sandy needs to talk about is, we write fiction now, and it's romance fiction.
Romance fiction.
It's for women.
I know.
These are medical men.
Keeping the fires burning.
Men don't read books. There's no sense writing men stuff. So we have two people, a Swedish surgeon, Signa Lund, and she's a surgeon on the West Coast where I grew up in the 1930s. And her male partner is Phineas Flint. He's an Irishman, and he's the local sheriff. And together they solve medical mysteries.
They sound
medical.
And we don't use
that sounds like something you need to market to Netflix.
Well, I don't know.
Netflix, they're always looking for storylines.
I know.
Series and stuff like that with interesting twists and characters. That's an interesting mix of people there.
Yeah. What's your pen name on those?
Ann Miller Johnson, MD.
Ann Miller Johnson, MD is the author of those. Yeah. I will put those links in the comments.
Well, thank you. Well,
yes. Most definitely.
You can get those on Amazon.com.
Like Agatha Christie murder mystery, only from the medical side.
And you can get them on Amazon, and I think through Kindle or audio. Is it going to be on audio too, or?
I don't know, but they're on Kindle. It costs you $3. They're cheap.
Yeah.
And we use the last two are Juliet and Ophelia. Ophelia is very dark. It's about the murder of a trafficked young woman to be a prostitute in the Northwest in the 1930s, and finding out who killed her. is in place. Begins with an autopsy. Cigna does an autopsy and discovers some things about this young woman, that she's been trafficked from China through Manchuria.
Yeah.
We know that kind of stuff for.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Did you come into contact with that kind of thing when you were overseas?
One way or another. Yeah, we know what that.
Well, that's
kind
right.
of
My favorite shows for a while there was CSI. Remember the CSI show?
Yeah.
You know, somebody died, and now it's like the pathologists get in there, and now we
Go
got to,
backwards,
work
right.
back to find out how this happened. But it was all medical, and I thought that was so fascinating.
Somebody does have a question for you guys. You and I've talked about this, so I already know how you're going to answer it. Was Mr. Dr. Holmes ever a fan of the TV show MASH? And if so, did it have the same feel? Were you working out of tents, or was it a structure hospital that you were working out of?
I didn't hear the question very well.
Like,
well,
do
the
you
hospital
yes.
in Africa was a 5-story building.
It was a 5-story building
built by an Israeli firm and American
Oh,
architects.
okay.
What
So
we
where
had
the
in
tent
Malaya,
would come in
ultimately,
would possibly be, did you guys do outreaches into the village, like mobile things, or did everybody come into the hospital? Was it a sedentary sort of
no,
situation?
in Malaya we had no hospital. There was a
Okay.
government hospital in town, but we would send them patients. They weren't very good, but in any event, we had built for us. The mission had plenty of money, actually. 2 30-foot long buses
Oh,
that
okay.
had 3 rooms in them, and they were room for the doctor in the back, a room for the nurse in the middle, and then a room at the very front with the dispenser on one side and the lab guy on the other side. They were air conditioned. We'd drive right into a village by schedule, and the patients would come in the back and go out the front. It was very efficient, and it worked very well. We were fortunate that we didn't have to do things on the fly. We started that way, and we realized that if you're lucky and you get some capital, you can practice medicine better.
Right. Were you guys ever afraid of animals in either of those places?
Of course.
Yes. Do you have a story?
Well, in Africa, we'd take an afternoon drive sometimes up around Kilimanjaro. The kids would like to do that. And we had a little Toyota kind of station wagon thing. And the kids were so sated with seeing animals. If you drove near a giraffe, they wouldn't even look up. They'd seen 100 giraffes. What would you want to look at a giraffe for? Or zebras. If you saw a goat, they might look up. Well, one day we were driving over to the coast of Mombasa for a little holiday, came around a corner, and there was an elephant. I mean, a big sucker with a broken tusk.
Oh.
I've been told over the years that a broken tusk means they're really mean. So I said, Grace, get a picture. And she said, no, get out of here. In the back seat, we yelling, either get a picture, Mom, or Daddy, get out of here. She finally got the picture. If he stepped on us, it would have been like a beer can.
Wow.
But that's the most dangerous one we ever saw. She has a picture somewhere. We were out near Killam. We were just the 2 of us out near the Maasai country out there, Serengeti. And we were parked under a tree, a big tree, and you could count 8 lionesses lying on branches up in the tree.
Wow.
Because the lions feed at night, and in the daytime they rest.
Right.
So I had Grace, I didn't let her get out, but I had her hang her head out with a camera, and she got that good picture.
Oh, so
that's where I got one of my best photographs ever. Was I had a stopover in Nairobi, and I decided to go out on a photo safari, and we were out there for a couple hours, and the driver got all excited, and he took off across the Serengeti and said, there's been a kill, and so we're like, oh, where all the lions are, around this carcass. And so I'm all excited thinking I'm going to be Mr. National Geographic, photographer, showing up on the scene with these ferocious beasts tearing up a zebra or something. Right. And as we get closer and closer, my eyes started watering because the smell was so bad.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot, the thing had been out there rotting in the sun. So it's like I didn't, it was a kind of an eye-opening experience that those National Geographic photos are kind of sterile. Real Africa's got, smells and noises that go with it.
So Teddy says, Grandpa, tell the story about the bear, but also before that, Madeline says, Gammy, wave hi to the fans. So Madeline, you guys got to wave, and
Okay.
your daughter and your son are on here too. You know, Lisa saying bear me. Andy, Andy's about what about the cobra? So there's bear and a cobra story. So we only have a couple minutes, but you know, which bear cobra story?
Let me, can we summarize now? Because
absolutely.
When we got home from Africa, it was 1972. We had 28 more years to practice medicine at KU Medical Center. And we made an amazing discovery. We had grants for research in childhood cancer and in herbicides. We did a lot of work in that area. But we discovered that the American government has a lot more money than the church. We bid and won a contract after the Cold War was over to invigorate pediatric oncology in Hungary, the whole country, $2.5 million of your money. And It was a marvelous program. It was the pediatric oncology outreach to Hungary, POOH. The State Department loved it. They just loved it. And we really made a difference. We made a difference. And then we got another shot. Good, one of our good friends is Jeff Collier, who was briefly our governor, and before that the vice governor, whatever he is, for Kansas. He put me on to Kyrgyzstan, which is a little tiny country north of Afghanistan that was left over by the end of the Soviet Union. We got in there, and with excellent woman who was our great friend, Louise Redford, who was fluent in both Russian and German and English. And we organized their entire healthcare system.
Wow.
I'm not bragging. I mean, this is bragging in a way, but I'm telling you, there are opportunities out there. And if you're lucky, you can get some money and do some stuff.
That's right. And so before we end, if you have advice for anyone, and I know, we haven't really talked about God in the midst of this, but with your faith and everything, what is the most important thing, Grace, do you think?
Well, I think it made us humble, and we worked hard. And at one point, Fred said, I just don't know if I can stand to do this anymore. It's just wearing me out. And then he said, I have to remind myself that Jesus died for everyone, not just for the Americans and so forth. And we're in the right place.
That's good.
So,
yeah.
I could tell you two very brief stories about Malaya. It'll bring tears. I was driving in the jungle in the middle of the night from a meeting in Kuala Lumpur up home in Ipoh. And I skidded because it rained, and I hit a bridge abutment and bent in the right front fender of the car. And I couldn't go any farther. It was 3:00 in the morning. So I thought, what'll I do? I'll just sit here in the car, go to sleep, and wait. 4:00, thereabouts, there was a tap on the window. I looked out, and I saw some Chinese guys out there. And they weren't rubber tappers. I didn't know what they were. I thought they're gorillas is what they are. Well, he said I should tap to open the window. I did. And my Chinese was good in those days, and we had a little conversation. And there were about 6 of them, and motioned for me to get out. And I thought, what are they going to do? Are they going to steal the car? What would the car's no good in a jungle? They're going to shoot me, or what are they going to do with me? And he said, well, what's the matter? And so I go to show him that the front fender bent in. He said, we can fix that. I said, you can fix it? He said, sure. Easy. He sent the youngest guy in the jungle. He comes back with a little sapling, bends that thing out. And I said, well, thank you. How much do I owe you? He said, you don't owe me anything. You don't owe us anything. Ni, I see if I can do it in Cantonese. I don't know if I can. Ni baofu gage nyen tuikun. He didn't say Jesus, but you love the people. And and on the side of this station wagon was Luther's seal. and it just in the middle it has the cross, and there's a rose around it. And in this, it said above that, it said in Malay, it said Lutheran Church Clinic, and below it said Lutheran Church Clinic in Chinese.
Mhm.
And I said, "Do you want anything?" "No." "Dai Chen, how Donyan." I was let go. I was sent off. I get home. Grace is having breakfast with the two girls, and I told her what happened. I said, "They let me go, Grace. What do you suppose they did that for?" She said, "You dumbhead. Why would they kill the goose that laid the golden egg? Half of our antibiotics went out into the jungle to the gorillas."
Ah, I see. Oh,
One last thing.
yes.
This is so precious to us. Our church in Malaya had a young people's group who had a reasonable choir for the fact that they were Chinese kids who had no real appreciation of Western music, and they wanted to do a cantata for Easter in 1962. We helped them. And when they were done, they were so proud. They said, "We want to do Handel's Messiah." You said, "You can't do Handel's Messiah. This would be a disaster. That's hard." They said, "We're going to do it. We want you to help us." We said, "There's no way we're going to be part of a disaster. Don't count on us." But Grace wrote to America and got about, 30, 40 copies of Handel's Messiah.
25.
We met every Saturday afternoon with, how many were there? 30 of them?
Mhm.
Ages 15, 16 up to maybe 21, 22. And it was in English, their choice. We toured Malaya, and we had a concert arranged. We toured about 10 or 15 places before Christmas in 1962. They did a remarkable job. 4 parts, everybody got a solo. And I was astonished. We were astonished how good they were. We even did the Pastoral Symphony with a Chinese flute, the piano, and a violin, I think it was. The last concert we did was in an old British rubber plantation south of Kuala Lumpur, the capital. It was open, and there were a lot of people who came, not just Chinese people who were curious, but lots of people from around. And the kids knew, we think it was kids, knew that this was their last concert. There was one girl, no vocal training, 16 years old, who sang, "I know." I'll continue. "I know that my Redeemer liveth."
Mhm.
In the middle of her solo, it was perfect, bang on every note, perfect. A swallow flew in the church, flew around the inside of the church, and lit in her hair.
Wow.
She didn't miss a note. She reached up, picked up the swallow. It flew out, around the church, and out into the night.
Wow.
I thought then, and I think to this day, I've seen the Holy Spirit.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great story. Wow. So they didn't tell you they sing as well. They were singers as well. They had a barber shop quartet, correct?
Pictures up there.
Yeah, just got a picture. So they did that as well. So they're just amazing people, right? I mean, I get the honor of every weekend of hanging out with them and hearing their stories. You guys are amazing, and what you've done. I mean, I can imagine how many people you've impacted and that you don't even know, that you
Well,
have.
Thank you. Sandy is one of the cadre of very nice ladies who help us out.
Mhm.
We're 88 years old and not as spry as we once were. And we appreciate that more, Sandy, than we can ever tell you.
Guys.
We
You
sure
guys
do.
have enriched my life for sure. So I hope they've enriched your life as well. I mean, there's
Beautiful.
so many things they've done, and I mean, amazing. They make me go, I need to do more, right? I mean, like I need to do something else, and I feel so blessed in this last year, including with you, Bob, too. And I know the work that you do as well. I mean, I'm sure it's making an impact, and you don't even know. And So I think that's on all of us. We need to do that. And thank you guys so much for coming on with me tonight.
We are honored.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, Bob, always, for having great questions and thank you all, the audience that's been watching. We appreciate you guys every week. And I hope you guys have a blessed evening and night, and just take something. And I will put all the links to all of their books later on, because that's a lot. And people are saying thank you to you. Jason down in Australia saying thank you. So yeah. So
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your story. It's been
Thank you guys.
heartwarming, fascinating, hilarious. We've covered the gamut of emotions.
I know. So thank you guys for watching, and thank you to their family, wonderful family. So thank you guys too.
Bye, guys.
So say bye. Yes. Good night.
Good night,
Yes.
everyone.
Good night. We'll exit on.